thanks everyone for joining us. Appreciate you hopping on for this public service perspectives presentation today on this beautiful fall afternoon. Hope some of you are probably hanging out outside for this. Before we get started, I do want to remind everyone, we ask that you please ensure your microphone's muted throughout, just so we don't disrupt our presenters. But welcome you to keep your cameras on if you'd like. We'd love to see you all. I know it's over the lunch hour, so feel free to enjoy your lunch. And also continue to drop comments and questions in the chat throughout, even though we ask you to stay muted. We'll address all of the questions at the end after our presentations. For Q&A, you can also use the raise your hand feature, and we'll call on you to unmute yourselves and ask your questions. Kind of the last housekeeping note is to just let you know that this is being recorded and will be added to our Public Service Perspectives YouTube playlist. If anyone has any announcements or upcoming events they want to share with everyone, I welcome you to go ahead and do that at this time. Well, I have a couple. I do want to promote, so next week is Global Entrepreneurship Week. It is a global movement that we participate in. It's the 13th annual one, and I think it's the 4th year that we've participated at Ohio University. So I'll drop a link in the chat to the website to learn a little bit about the activities that we have going on next week for that. But do want to leave a little plug that we are working on a video campaign to gather stories of entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs in the Ohio community. So I do encourage you all to submit a video to us. We would love to hear your stories and give you that platform to share with others and inspire others to follow their dreams too. And on Monday evening, we have Dan Snyder. He's an Ohio alum, and he is the founder and CEO of Lower.com. So he'll be joining us Monday evening at Baker Center Ballroom, and we'd love to see you all there for that as well. And then Jam-packed event week. Next Friday, we also have another public service perspective session. Mazika Sullivan, who is a professor, associate director, and I believe the chief diversity officer as well for the school at OSU, the School of Environmental and Natural Resources. And he'll be talking with us about scientists' role in advocating for water protection. So I think that covers all the events that I can share for next week. And if anyone has anything else, I welcome you to go ahead.
Mackenzie, I do have two, sorry, thought of them. On 2 weeks time, Wednesday, the 17th of November, the last film in the Sustainability Film Series, Wednesday night at 7 p.m. at the Athena. It's Fantastic Fungi is the film, one that I've heard very good reviews of. And then also on November 18th, the Contemporary History Institute is going to have a roundtable on climate change, kind of in the wake of Glasgow and COP26. Dr. Michelle Maroney from Health Sciences and Professions, Dr. Dan Carney from Economics, and myself will be reflecting on the climate change outcomes from that negotiation.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. And if you have a link or any file you can share with me, I'm happy to share that out to everyone as well, or you can drop it in the chat. Okay. I think that probably covers everything, so I'll go ahead and segue into our presentations today. So this afternoon, we'll be hearing from 3 of our very own Voinovich School students, Melissa Damico. She's an Honors Tutorial College Environmental Studies candidate and a research scholar here at the Voinovich School. She'll be sharing about the Green-Gray Alliance's work in providing resources for older adults facing the impacts of climate change. After Melissa, we have Laura Davis. She is a Master of Public Administration candidate. She'll be sharing about the variety of projects she's working on with our Center of Economic Development and Community Resilience. And then we have Demoina Rakatosa. She is a Master of Science in Environmental Studies candidate. She will be presenting on her research exploring human pressures on protected areas. Each will have about 15 minutes to present, and then we'll take your questions at the end. I think that covers everything. So at this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Melissa to get us started.
So hello, my name is Melissa Damico, and I'm in my final year of my undergraduate environmental studies degree in the Honors Tutorial College at Ohio University. And after my freshman year in this program, I became a research apprentice with Dr. Jeff DeBelko and spent the summer embedded in the office of Age-Friendly Columbus and Franklin County, a research planning and advocacy organization seeking to make communities more livable for people of all ages. So age-friendly communities is a strategy developed by the World Health Organization in response to older adults comprising a growing proportion of the population. This strategy uses 8 domains, which are shown on the screen, to assess communities and develop environments that foster healthy and active aging that is safe, free from poverty, and allows older adults to age with autonomy, health, and dignity. In the United States, AARP facilitates the age-friendly strategies with the goal of creating communities that are more livable for people of all ages. While in age-friendly Columbus, I considered that someone's risk during an emergency event is determined by 2 factors. The first is their individual vulnerability. Factors that increase an individual's risk to natural hazards could be social, like being socially isolated, for instance, which unfortunately many older adults experience, particularly in rural areas. Or an individual could be more vulnerable because of physical limitations, like having limited physical mobility, having to rely on health devices or mobility devices, or even having just a chronic condition that requires daily medication. All of those could increase your vulnerability during a natural hazard. While reviewing literature, I found that climate assessments regularly identified older adults as a demographic vulnerable to the impacts of climate change because they tend to have these characteristics, but rarely had tailored mitigation plans to adapt for adaptation strategies to lower older adults' unique risk. This is particularly problematic considering the trend toward aging populations that many developed nations, including the United States, are experiencing. While in Columbus, I found that older adults often suffered during extreme events because they were receiving the warnings for impending natural hazards like a heat wave, but they weren't sure what to do in response to those warnings to mitigate their vulnerability. So on the screen, I've listed the characteristics I found that make individuals more vulnerable during natural hazards. And then for all of these characteristics, they're likely to become more prevalent as we age. The second factor that influences an individual's risk is the natural hazard itself. So that's the type of natural hazard, the strength of it, and the location or proximity to the communities or infrastructure. We know that as the climate continues to change, natural hazards will increase in intensity and frequency. So in Ohio, what that will look like is more intense heat waves, more frequent flooding, and more severe storms. All of these hazards can result in power outages from overuse or damage to power infrastructure. And while Ohio isn't necessarily experiencing like the wildfires we're seeing out west or hurricanes like other parts of the US, the heat and flooding and the power outages are particularly problematic for older adults because of the unique characteristics and the unique vulnerability that they have, which I mentioned in the previous slide. So to decrease this vulnerability in Columbus, I collected resources from just reliable aging resources and climate ones that would provide information to older adults about how to prepare for what to do during and what to do after all of the disasters I mentioned on the previous slide. Following my time in Columbus, I continued to research these topics in Athens, Ohio as a Voinovich Undergraduate Research Scholar. I began reviewing the sustainability plans from Athens city and county organizations and noted overlaps in domains critical to age-friendly efforts. So while reviewing each of the 8 reports, I noted if they mentioned adaptations for vulnerable populations, if the plan particularly named older adults as a vulnerable population, and any adaptation the report suggested or plans the group made that would have an impact on older adults in the community. So this is an example from the Village of Amesville's Sustainability Roadmap, where they identified older adults as vulnerable because of individual mobility limitations. One of the characteristics I talked about earlier was the limited mobility that older adults sometimes have. So to make their community more sustainable, Amesville identified that they would need to provide greater transportation services for its older adult constituents. Next, I have an example from the Athens County Sustainability Roadmap, which specifically identified older adults as vulnerable. And this was kind of unique because of the reports I reviewed, this was one of only 3 that named older adults as a vulnerable population. And you can see they did so with the asterisks and included older or elderly as a vulnerable population. The other reports that mentioned older adults in particular were hazard mitigation related rather than focused on sustainability efforts. Finally, I have an example from the Athens Sustainability Action Plan, which shows plans for implementing a carbon tax, a measure that would certainly impact older adults. And after reviewing all of these plans, I was able to present my findings to the age-friendly Athens County Sustainability Domain, the first age-friendly community to have added a 9th domain for sustainability and climate resilience. I was able to make suggestions for including older adults in these types of conversations and activities in Athens, Ohio. As I'm in my final year of my undergraduate degree in the Honors Tutorial College, I'm working on my thesis on these same topics. For this project, I will be conducting interviews with leadership among the 14 age-friendly communities in Ohio to assess opportunities for pursuing climate-smart and age-friendly community interventions. In addition to being the topic of my undergraduate thesis, lessons from these qualitative interviews will inform pilot programs to test goals developed in partnership with Age Friendly Innovation Center, the new name for Age Friendly Columbus and Franklin County since moving their operations to the Rev 1 Ventures in Columbus, which is an innovation center. Additionally, Age Friendly being an international strategy offers opportunities to scale up these local efforts in Athens and Columbus and compare what's going on here to what's going on in international communities. So in addition to my undergraduate thesis and writing that, I am also learning Japanese, as Japan has a super age society and the islands frequently experience natural disasters. Despite these characteristics, though, Japan is well known for its care of older adults and has developed some of the most innovative emergency preparedness measures. So a comparative study with Japan is kind of the next step for my research. And that's all I have today. So thank you for your attention. And now Laura is going to give her presentation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Laura Davis, and I work for the Center of Economic Development and Community Resilience. I'm a graduate assistant under Dr. Jason Jolly, and I'm a Master's of Public Administration candidate. So as LeBron is just a kid from Akron, I'm just a kid from Appalachia. It's part of my story. So I did my undergrad at Ohio State University. I'm from Morgan County, which is one of the 32 Appalachia counties. I did a bachelor's in science and agribusiness and applied economics, and I graduated in 2018. I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I knew I wanted to be in the public services, and I ended up in the Peace Corps. So I did Peace Corps Nepal in 2018. I was there for 14 months before I was evacuated due to COVID. So I did nutrition sensitive food security, and it was asset-based community building. So we really focused on finding community counterparts and empowering these impoverished communities. So there's a picture there of me and my farmers group that I made. And then my sister and I, through COVID, we started a tomato business. So that's part of our food insecurity. I was just from a small farm in Morgan County, and I just fueled my passion to kind of serve and feed others. And then the picture in the bottom right hand corner is my mom and dad when I graduated from my undergrad. So my research, specifically me and my passions, are community building, food insecurity, and economic development. Very similar to what I grew up around and also similar to what I did in the Peace Corps. And then this is my economic development team that I serve with at Ohio University. And some of the research we work with is market research, community resilience, business and job retention in the 32 Appalachian counties, increasing quality of life and kind of defining that, public and partnering with public and private stakeholders, entrepreneurism, and economic gardening. And what economic gardening is, I kind of love this because you just kind of take these communities and you plant the seed. and you see where that can go. And I'll talk more about that. So our big kind of grant and funding, how and why there's so many of us and how and why we're doing so much work is called the Bobcat Network. It stands for Building Opportunities Beyond Coal, Accelerating Transition. And so the 32 Appalachian counties, basically a little Ohio history lesson. And if you guys have any family in the Appalachian region, you understand this is probably 70, 80 years ago, all of our kin worked for the coal mining industries. It was a great industry. We were prospering, everyone had money. And then once we started transitioning outside of coal, it was just kind of a sad story where we struggled to transition. And one of the cool things is with this work I'm doing is I get to say we, because these were my family and friends. So the Voinovich partnership with the Ohio Valley Regional Development Commission proposes to assist communities in the OVRDC region that have been impacted by the decline of coal economy. And it's a regional collaboration. So we work with economic development groups, county commissioners. There's a whole slew of stakeholders, and there's 12 counties in the OVRDC region. And one thing that's really cool about what we do is everything is data driven. So we're not just approaching them with what we think should happen. We go through, we find the data and we say, this is your diagnostic for what's going on. And then we kind of empower them to make assumptions and do the work they need to do to improve. So I like to say that the students are the boots on the ground. We're the ones going and getting the research, and the professionals and the people and our colleagues that we work for have kind of been in it for a long time, and they know what recommendations to make. So a lot of the data I have gathered leads to an industry cluster analysis, a business incubator, economic scans, skill shed analysis, workforce activities. And this year, they may have done it in the past, but it's just something that I really look forward to. Every Wednesday, we kind of have these weekly educational opportunities where professionals in the industry come in and give us advice and kind of how to be a better economic developer. And a lot of it right now has been our colleagues within the Voinovich, and it's just incredible to see the wealth of knowledge they have. Some of the things they've taught us is in-plan, census, Appalachian economic development, remote work, economic impact analysis, public administration data extraction, and industry clusters. And then these are a few of just the presentations we've been through. And this is 2 hours every Wednesday. And sometimes it seems like it's a lot, but then the takeaways and the application to the work we're doing makes it's always worth it. So my graduate assistant research. So we get a lot of projects, and oftentimes because we are the boots on the ground, it's like, wow, I'm gathering all this data, but where's the application? So it's really cool to see the fruition of when things actually happen. We have professional partnerships with our colleagues. There's mentorship. So one of the fun things is when I came in not having any economic development experience. So it's been really great to just kind of be vulnerable and reach out to the professionals for help, specifically colleagues, and just for them to guide and teach professional development, and then the data-driven research and publications. So the picture to the right is a publication that one of our colleagues did, and he asked for reviews and edits, and he was able to include our names on that. So it's really great to be able to have publications in the future. And then these are some of the projects I've worked on. So I actually started in June, and my first project was with Kirsten Hall. And again, just finding numbers and trying to figure out how to present these to different stakeholders that we work with. So my first one was Adams County. And as you can see, education, age distribution, education attainment, population trends, and different things. And then that later is compiled into a strategic plan to present to these local economies. Opportunity zones, this has been one of my favorites. It was an initiative based on the previous administration where they had kind of identified just lower income places. And so an opportunity zone is distressed communities and looking for new investment on capital gains. And I worked with the OVRDC region, the 12 counties, and Ty Giffen and I, we this project has been going on a while. So we find general information, schools, transportation, attractions, and we basically market why people should come in and invest in these areas. And I think that's part of the Appalachian story is we're still people and we still have a lot to offer. We were just forgotten about. And then the next one I did was an economic scan, and I worked with Eric Belleville. And obviously there was a lot of different research aspects of that project, and that later led into a strategic plan. And then the remote working economic opportunities was done by Brent Lane, and he calls it blacksmithing. So he did a lot of the work, and then he kind of gave it to different stakeholders and different members of our team, and we gave kind of constructive criticism or what we thought about it. This project was really interesting because the idea is that in the future, remote work is going to be a lot more common. And we talked about the attraction to the Appalachian region and how much potential this could give the area. And the next one was the OVRDC job information. So I worked with Clara Bone on this, and we talked about how, where, why people can find work, what kind of work they need, what kind of training they need. And then I started this project, and then I passed it along to one of my colleagues who has mapping experience through GIS. So he was able to map all of these different places. So if you are a community member in one of these OVRDC regions, you're going to be able to see your closest college opportunities, job training, where people are hiring. And then the last one, and the one I'm working on right now, is the Lawrence County Recreational Study. And this is also another one of my favorites. So I can't wait to see how it'll be done. So I'm working with Martin Honenberger, and this one I've had the opportunity to sit on boards with county commissioners. Marty and I develop the scope of work. We get to provide recommendations, and I work very closely with the director of the Convention and Visitors Bureau and the Economic Development Corporations. And we're working, I get to kind of cold call private business owners just to kind of see who's coming into the area, what they're doing, what they need, and how we can improve. And then also, again, I'm working with another colleague, and you can see a map down there. And thank you guys for having me. It was an honor. Thank you for everyone that sat in on this meeting. And next, we're going to go to Des Moines now.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mona Lacoutson, and I'm a first-year graduate student in the Environmental Studies program. And today I'm going to talk about people behind nature conservation. You know, usually we think about animals and plants and lemurs, but I want to talk about people, and more specifically about who manage our protected areas. And I think there are some links between what Laura just presented about. You know, we talk about people when we transition from a cold-based economy, and then now it's more about people. So we know that people really matter, and they are really the key factor for an organization's success or failure. And about conservation of nature, I saw this quote in WWF website. It says, people are a driving force behind many of the world's gravest conservation challenges, but people are also the solution. And in this web page, they featured a great friend of mine, Jonah Ratsimbazafi, as a conservationist. But Jonah is not an ordinary conservationist. He is a well-known primatologist. He has even a lemur named after him. And just last week, he got featured on a stamp. So, you know, it's not the kind of ordinary people in conservation. But I want to talk more about people in the field, those who are working with local communities that are located in those remote places. And we know that today, we have more than 260,000 protected areas in the world. And in this map, you can see all these green and blue areas. Those are protected areas. And we can imagine that there are people behind them that are making them run, that threats are controlled, and the ecosystems are thriving. And that people around and in protected areas also get benefit from these protections. And I'm going to talk about my home country, Madagascar. And Madagascar is an island located in the eastern part of Africa. It is almost as big as Texas, to give you an idea how it is. We have 26 million population, and the gross domestic product per capita is only $495 US. So if you compare to the US, which has more than 63,000 US dollar for GDP per capita, so you know the difference. But the country is very rich in terms of biodiversity. We can it's the home of unique species of like lemurs. All the lemurs that we found in the world are found in Madagascar, if we don't count the zoos. But it's the place for lemurs. And also, for instance, 96% of vascular plants are only found in Madagascar, 100% of amphibians, 37% of birds, and the list can go on and on, like for fishes, reptiles, palm trees. But unfortunately, poverty and conservation do not make a good marriage. So in this map, you can see the pink color here are the tree cover loss in the past 20 years. So if you don't protect these places, we're going to lose all these animals and plants, but also it has lots of consequences for the well-being and for the life of the people in Madagascar. And so it would be also a loss for the world, because those are the species that we only find in Madagascar. And to protect the biodiversity and its nature, the Madagascar government has built a strategy to increase the number and the coverage of the protected areas in the country. So in the last 6 years, the number and the coverage areas of the protected areas increased 3 times. And you can see in this map, all these green areas are all the protected areas. So we have lots of new protected areas. And again, who is managing those protected areas? Who are ensuring that those are not just paper parks, but they are really delivering conservation outcomes, and they're achieving what they are set for. And I'm going to talk about a project that I did in with the Wildlife Conservation Society, WCS, in a project in Madagascar. We wanted to make a capacity building project to support protected area managers. But the first question that we had was, who are managing those 123 protected areas in the country? And most specifically, we wanted to know, are they adequately trained, and what competencies do they need? So we wanted to know the skill gap between what is really needed and the existing skills. So instead of just asking people, okay, what are the skills that you need, we used a self-assessment competence-based questionnaire. It was based from 2 key documents: the Global Register for Competencies for Protected Area Professionals from IUCN, and Madagascar has developed its own competency register as well. So you use those 2 documents to build our questionnaire. And basically what it asks is, it identifies 11 competence areas. And so those are the competence areas that you need to know to have when you manage protected areas. So it's not just like conservation or environment, but it has a lot of diversity of skills and competencies are required. And in our questionnaire, we have 4 levels for professional level. So we can see that a level 1 person can be like a field agent or a park ranger. So he might need competences in law enforcement activities And you can have also someone in the level 3 as a senior managers, like a park director that will use a competence in law enforcement activities, but their task would be very different. What are expected from them are different. So in our questionnaire, we asked the respondent to choose the level of their professional level, and then to identify 3 competence areas that they use on a daily basis throughout the year, and then to self-assess the competencies compared to the standards. And what we really wanted to know are the areas where they really feel like they have no or little competencies, so that in our project we can offer the training activities or capacity building initiatives that target those competencies. In the study that we did, we were able to reach 139 people from 46 terrestrial protected areas, and they represent 22 institutions. And we also did organize 7 regional workshops covering 19 regions out of the 20 in the country. And in those workshops, we discussed more about those competencies, but also other issues of the professions as protected area managers. And I'm going to present today some of the results that we had in this study. The first one that I found very interesting was the educational background. So we can see in this graph how the diversity of educational background decreases as the professional level increases. So we can see that level 1, the field agent, like the park rangers, people that are working in the field, doing reforestation or community support, they have more diverse background. And then we can see at executive level, the people that are, like top level people, they are mostly from natural sciences. And in natural sciences, I also include environmental sciences. And I was interested also to see if we have people from the management sector, because this is about protected area management. And we can see that we don't have many of them. So we have mostly people from natural sciences and environmental sciences. And about the most used competence areas, and here I'm presenting only 2 levels. The first one is the senior managers, like the park directors or the head of protected area, and the level 2, the technicians. So we can see that they use very different competencies. The senior managers mostly use strategy and project management, a lot of public relation and communication, and conservation monitoring and research. Whereas with the technician level, they use a lot of competencies from the 3 areas: the community structuration and support, conservation monitoring and research, and environmental education. And about the competency needs, then we've discovered that among the top 10 competency needs that the senior managers need, they are all in the strategy and project management competence area. So 7 out of them are in this single competence area. So it's about like building a funding strategy or communication strategy, business plan, risk management measures, information and knowledge management, and so on. And if you can remember, they are all from natural sciences background. So this is something that was very interesting for us to see. And for the technicians that are the level 2 people, we've identified the competencies it was more diverse, like from 3 competence areas: conservation, monitoring, and research. Also on strategy and project management, and environmental education. So it's mostly about, it's mostly diverse for them. So although this research was, I would say, targeted a small population of protected area managers, it was very interesting because first, it was the first of its kind to to study the profile of who are managing the protected areas and what kind of skills they really want to have, or they really need to have in the job. And so we can ask questions about adequacy of training to employment. Do we need to train senior managers, those people from natural sciences, more in project management and strategy development? Or do we need to attract more people from the management sector to work in protected area management? So those are both valid questions. And we've also seen that technicians in protected areas actually really need multidisciplinary skills. It's not only about natural sciences, it's about working with people doing project management, environmental education. But also beyond the competencies that I just talked, we had the huge opportunity in this study to talk with lots of people, and mostly also about the optimization of human capital working in and for protected areas. Some points that are rarely discussed in Madagascar are the mental and physical health and safety of these people. They work in very difficult conditions. They are far from their families. Their wages are very low. There is very little career development opportunities. There is a high turnover. And if you remember the graph that I showed, that in field agents, we have people from a more diverse background, educational background. But then, in the top level functions, we only hire people from natural sciences. So there is little chance for people to grow in the professional career. And in the study, I only focused on the employees of the protected areas, but we know that those conservation sites work a lot with external workforce, like local communities, sometimes with volunteers and researchers that are contribute to achieve the objectives of the protected areas. So we cannot only look at those the employees only. And my master research that I want to do here in Athens, I want to continue to explore these human dimensions of protected area management. And my research questions are: what is the staffing gap in quality and in quantity in Madagascar's protected areas? How do these protected areas address the staffing gap? Do they have strategies, or how do they work with local communities for that? So in addition to increase the global body of knowledge in protected area management, I hope that my research will provide human resource guidance to low resource sites or developing countries, low-income countries like Madagascar, on how to attract and retain external non-paid workforce, but in a non-exploitative and in an empowering way. I hope that my research will increase the recognition of local communities' contribution to conservation. And more generally, I hope that my research will help the conservation sector catch up in human capital management, which other sectors have been doing for years. So thank you for your attention, and you can reach out to me if you have any question. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. I really can't express how impressive all of your presentations were, and how grateful I am. So thank you for the work that you all are doing, making a difference. You all have obviously made such a huge impact in the region, and then in Des Moines, in your case, in the world, and the research you're going to do, Melissa, in Japan. I'm very excited to hear how that goes. I do want to turn it over to our audience to ask some questions of you all. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat, or raise your hand, or just simply unmute yourself. We have a quaint group here, so feel free to turn your cameras on and unmute yourselves and have a good discussion for the last couple minutes here.
I'll jump in with some some questions and encourage others to do it as well. Thank you all for very interesting presentations. Maybe a question for each of you. Demoina, your sense of, can you give us a sense of the amount of funding that supports those, well, all the positions, but with the particular focus on the senior management and the technicians that you provided for us? How much of that is domestic and how much of that is international from bilateral sources or NGO sources? And I'm interested in part to understand how difficult or what avenues are for diversifying the disciplinary backgrounds of that leadership and making these kind of training changes that would be there. And I'm not sure which sources of funding would be more flexible, but interested in that kind of division. For Laura, for Laura, a number of your approaches resonated with me and also made me think of what our friends just south of the river are doing in West Virginia, and WVU's, I think it's outdoor economic opportunity, that kind of new shop that Danny Twilley, who was here at OU, is part of. And I'm interested in whether you're seeing in the networks that you're working in, whether there are comparable efforts to take advantage of the kind of recreational appeal and the kind of natural outdoor opportunities that Southeastern Ohio also has, and tie those together with remote work programs and incentives to attract and keep people here who are working in place, but also engaged in larger economies in this kind of COVID era where remote work is more widespread and more accepted. And then finally, Melissa, if you could reflect on where you see challenges in the kind of taking this forward in terms of, challenges and opportunities with this particular group of older adults, opportunities perhaps in terms of, kind of, it is mom and apple pie. Everybody is for taking, paying attention and taking care of older adults, yet evidence suggests that we often say a lot about it, but don't do a lot about it. So, that kind of, on the one hand, you have a very popular group that you're focusing on. On the other hand, we kind of continually somehow seem to neglect them. And so if you could reflect on that kind of simultaneous condition, be really interested in terms of, and whether you see kind of sustainability and climate resilience a way to kind of break through that.
Demoina, do you want to answer the first question and then we'll go around again?
Okay. I didn't know how it works. About the funding of the people that work in protected areas, especially level 2 and level 3. So most of them are funded by international donors. The government, they are not employees of the government. They are employees from national or local or international organizations that are applying for funds every year and every couple of years to get funds to have these people working for protected areas. So we do not have local funding for them, and they are not yet considered as a profession in Madagascar. It's not yet recognized as a profession.
Jeff, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Wow is all I can say. I mean, that it makes it really challenging, and also just the opportunity costs of always constantly fundraising for outside sources and outside priorities that are overwhelmingly about conservation and not necessarily about the kind of economic challenges and social challenges that the people of Madagascar are facing. So that makes it even. So all the more important. And you kind of buried the lead in your introduction. Folks should understand that Des Moines has been leading these efforts on the ground with a variety of kind of leading environmental NGO efforts in this space. So she's a real leader in this already, but also reflecting on what the larger field needs.
Yeah. So for your question, thank you for the question. First and foremost, the part that stood out to me, and you all can relate if you're in Appalachia, is access to broadband. That's kind of a longer down the road scope of, we're looking for numbers. We can prove we need broadband. We can prove why we need broadband, and it's a bigger issue. One of the guys I work for explains it as a basic utility, you know, like electricity, water, and access to internet, because obviously it's the next step to any type of advancement, especially with how we have the internet at our fingertips. But if you don't have access to that network, you're kind of a step behind. And then as far as, excuse me, the recreational study, so Lawrence County is actually the southernmost point of Ohio. So it's in the tri-state region. I wrote down the name, so thank you for passing that along. One of the big flags that I've seen, just kind of the disconnect between Lawrence County and the recreation, is they have the Wayne National Forest, but it just seems like it's kind of been in the shadows. And I've been reaching out to state and federal, for like whoever is managing the forest, and it seems like their perception is that the locals are going to advertise what they have there. And so when I met with the Conventioners Bureau director, there's just kind of a miscommunication for who markets what is there. And so that could be one of our recommendations. And then also, as far as that region, the Ohio River is huge. There's so many things you can do on the Ohio River. And if you're familiar with Lawrence County, right across the river from Ohio is Huntington, and huge attraction for people, but it just seems like somewhere along the line, Lawrence County needs to connect to this kind of attraction to how people are coming to this tri-state region. Like Lawrence County is one step behind. So that's where they partnered with Ohio University, and we get to give them the resources they need to move forward.
Thank you very much, Laura. I put that WVU Outdoor Economic Development Collaborative. I was thinking I put the URL in the chat for folks to check it out.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, and then I'll just quickly talk about maybe some of the challenges and opportunities with combining the climate and the aging kind of worlds. So when I started this research in Columbus, and I was looking for some overlap, the first things I kind of found were the tensions and the trade-offs that would have to happen. So one of the things that we initially thought of is, older adults, or at least from the sustainability perspective, we would want older adults to, if they're living alone and they're socially isolated, or even if they're just living alone in kind of a big single family house and their families moved out, that's not the most efficient use of that home. And it would be more efficient or more sustainable, or more, it would be better for the climate if older adults were, for instance, housed in a, like a long-term care kind of thing with other older adults. However, with the age-friendly research, that shows that many older adults, that removes them from a lot of the social connections that they have in houses. So all of their friends are no longer nearby, and that makes them really vulnerable during natural hazards, because your connections to the community, especially when you have limited mobility and things like that, that's how you kind of can survive those types of emergencies. And additionally, keeping older adults in those types of facilities with services provided, it actually decreases longevity for older adults. So kind of putting them in those institutions is not healthy for older adults, and therefore also not really sustainable for communities and for older adults. So those are kind of some of the tensions and some of the things we've had to navigate. And then, some of the opportunities is that, of course, older adults and climate aren't usually put aren't usually put together. Often with climate and stuff, you see youth movements and things like that. So with older adults, you can kind of, especially in areas where climate or in communities where climate is not necessarily what you want to lead with because it's politicized, you can talk about older adults and like Dr. Damico said, kind of say like, in these emergencies, whether or not they're related to climate, we want older adults to survive, and we want our grandparents and our parents and us when we're older to be able to navigate a warmer world. So yeah.
Thank you all. Those are all really great answers. Appreciate that. And thanks, Jeff, for putting some additional resources and information in the chat. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Don't be shy. Okay, well, I know it's a beautiful day out, so I won't hold you all, give you back the last 5 minutes of the hour. Appreciate all three of you, for your presentations and for all of your hard work and dedication to public service. Thank you. I can't wait to see the great things that you all do as you continue your research and work on these projects. Please do reach out to Jeff and I and others for resources and help, and if there's anything we can do to help amplify the work that you're doing. We do want to remind you to please join us next Friday for Mazika Sullivan's presentation, the Global Entrepreneurship Week activities, the Athena Cinema Sustainability Film Series coming up as well, and the additional, Jeff, I'm forgetting the last event that you recommended. Sorry, there's so many going on. What was the last one? Contemporary History Institute Roundtable on Climate Change on November 18th. Thank you. So yeah, those are all in the chat. You can also go to calendar.ohio.edu and search Voinovich events to see what all is coming up. So we have a lot going on, and I hope to see you all there, and I hope you all have a great weekend. Thanks so much.
Thank you.